It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Oh, it's very serious. Yes, it is. Welcome back. This is your Feel Good Breakfast Show, Expresso on S3. It's Monday, and hopefully you've had a very relaxing weekend. And if you're a journalist in Mzansi, though, it was probably yet another busy one because a lot of big stories have been developing significantly over the last few days. So we've brought our news editor, Roi Simpson, in studio to bring us all up to speed with what had been going on since the last time we chatted to him, which was just on Friday. Now, as always, we would love for you to be part of this conversation. Please let us know, perhaps share your thoughts or your opinions. You're welcome to do so on our WhatsApp line. Our number is 063-408-8863, or perhaps you can just simply pose your question on social media.
Yeah, bring it on indeed. And we're going to bring it on straight into the headlines right now. Roy, firstly, how are you doing this morning?
Lekker, thank you. It has been a busy weekend, exactly as you suggested, yeah.
Let's dive straight into it. Obviously, talk of the town, something we just reported on this morning, is our position when it comes to the US and Russia at the moment and this arms deal that we've been accused of. Where are we at with this? I mean, the latest that we just reported was that Brigity had accused us of obviously loading up Lady R with some of the arms.
Yeah.
And we are very tactfully denying this.
It's a lot of diplomatic speak at the moment. So Reuben E. Brigity II, as you say, US ambassador, did come out and said just outright that he believed and America believed that we'd been loading arms. And that's where we were on Friday. Since then, there's been a lot of diplomatic back and forth. Our Minister of International Relations, Naledi Pandor, issued what they call a démarche, which is where you get marched from your embassy to the host country's ministry. And basically it's a dressing down. And that meeting happened. Durko released a photo where you can see a very uncomfortable photo of Naledi Pandor and Reuben Brigity sitting quite oddly facing one another. Then Durko released this statement, I think on Saturday morning, stating that as a result of this meeting, Brigity had admitted that he'd crossed the line and unreservedly apologized to South Africa. That's what they claim. Reuben Brigity's Twitter is a much, much more tame and carefully phrased thing, where he says he was glad to meet Pandor so that he could get the opportunity to correct any misimpressions that he might have created.
So misimpressions, so was that his version of an apology?
It sounds like it.
When it comes to diplomatic speak, you can interpret things that way. So you do have a disjunct, though. There's definite difference between those two statements, from unreserved apology and opportunity to correct misimpressions. So it was left to someone, I think Clayson Moniela, to go to Twitter again on behalf of Durko and say, this is what this tweet means, and then he tags Reuben Brigity, and by implication, if Reuben doesn't then sort of deny this, then that means the same thing. So that's the position. Durko is claiming they have this apology. We don't see this apology in the public domain. Equally, and there's so many little gaps in this thing. When we said that no, we didn't load any arms, what we actually said was the Conventional Arms Control Committee didn't approve any arms being transferred.
So whether that happened or not is a different question.
Absolutely. We haven't denied, he hasn't denied. And the Mail and Guardian over the weekend published some interesting insights into this. They said that the Navy wasn't involved in this operation at all, that the Army took over the harbour and ran. Exactly, very, very unusual. And in fact, they then quote another unnamed naval officer who says that this idea of loading a ship at night is, quote, suspicious. So no, the idea, I was listening to you do the headlines this morning, and our finance minister trying to spin this as the matter's done, it's dusted, we don't have any issues with America. I don't think that's true. I think there's a lot more for this to evolve on this story over the course of this week ahead.
And of course, we still put an inquiry into this to actually find out what is going on, so we're yet to find out what the actual answer is.
Well, that's our response. It's a bit of a kick the can down the road response. We're going to bring in a retired judge to investigate whether this happened, as if we don't have an executive that can pick up a phone and speak to people and order them to tell him what's going on.
May I ask why we're bringing a retired judge in and not an active practicing judge?
Oh, that's quite standard.
Okay.
It allows that person to focus entirely on this one issue. While you're still in service as a judge, you obviously have these cases coming before you.
Okay.
And it indicates the importance of the matter that you want someone with that much legal knowledge to now apply all that knowledge, all that focus to this one issue. So yeah, it's fairly standard
Interesting
practice.
stuff indeed. Roy, thank you so much for this. And obviously you, Mzansi, can weigh in on this and come through on our social media or on our WhatsApp line. It's 063-408-8860. We'd love to hear your opinion on what the situation is right now and what you think we've actually done and what we should be doing to counter these measures. But of course, this conversation will continue in just a bit. For now, though, let's head to the kitchen and feed those bellies.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Oh, yes, Mzansi, welcome back. Your Feel Good Breakfast Show, and we are diving straight into the conversation once again. We're back to take a major look at all the stories of this week. And of course, our news editor, Roi Simpson, is back to help us unpack and understand all the implications of the headlines. Now, before the break, we were chatting about the evolution of some of the nation's big stories, but now we move on. Something has piqued our interest very much so, Roy.
A very surprised one, because the report says that it's not Cape Town but Bloemfontein that is the new destination of choice for first-time home buyers. Now, Roy, what is the first-time home buyers in Bloemfontein knowing what the rest of us is not? What are we missing out on?
What's the secret? What do I need to know?
What is it about Bloemfontein?
Is there a new mine?
The headline's slightly misleading in as much as this is data from a guy called Roi Simpson, who's one of these bond originators, and he says 71.4% of the homes being sold in Bloemfontein are to first-time buyers. So it's a slight. You get the impression like most first-time home buyers are buying in Bloemfontein, but it's much more about the nature of what's happening in Bloem. And that's just a fact. The other interesting fact in here is that the average age of a first-time home buyer in South Africa is now 35.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's become something that happens late in life.
Yeah.
I think that's just an economic reality. But yeah, so why Bloemfontein? Everyone's free to speculate. He says, oh, people want to come back and kind of put down roots. They want to start families, 35 years old, where their families are.
Okay.
That's one option. I think that the idea that people aren't locked into the office space anymore, that they're sort of digital nomads, that they're able to work remotely, that might also be at play here. Because now you can get a job in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, and live in Bloemfontein and operate perfectly fine.
That makes sense. That's efficiency for you right there. My question is this, though, and not to get too technical, but your headline, are you saying that the first-time homeowners in Bloemfontein are the ones that are purchasing 71% of homes in Bloemfontein? Or are homes that are being bought in Bloemfontein, 71% of them are first-time homeowners?
That's the one. So
does that not then play into the fact that potentially no one else is buying in Bloemfontein, only first-time home owners, the rest are buying in other provinces? So that would make me think that if I've already bought in Bloemfontein, maybe I'm over it, I'm going to buy in Cape Town now elsewhere.
You're complicating it.
No.
You know what I'm saying?
It's good to get critical about data. So often we take data at face value, and you've got to ask, where's the data from? What does it mean? So that you can understand exactly what the implications are. No, there's also a growth in the number of properties by quite a lot. So that's included in this report. So there's the thing. Look, it's so much cheaper to buy in Bloem than, say, Joburg or Cape Town.
Yeah.
So you can get a lot more for your money. So I think that's driving it.
A flat in Cape Town or a small holding in Bloemfontein? What's
pretty much the equation.
A shoebox or a massive size difference. But this one, Roy, I'm dying to pick your brain on this one, because we've heard in the news that there has been a very odd headline that two men have been living on the veranda of the South African embassy in the UAE for 6 years. That is absolutely bizarre. What do we know about that? Because there's also been some controversy around the UAE president landing some planes in the Eastern Cape. What is going on?
And not extraditing the Guptas. There's a strangeness between ourselves and the UAE. So these two guys, well, the claim is, this is their story. They're South Africans. They went over, they wanted to do some business in the UAE. In the process, they get handed these contracts to sign, written in Arabic. They don't speak or read Arabic. They just go, okay, we'll sign. We've had a discussion. We trust these guys. Apparently what they signed were acknowledgement of debt. The one guy, 2 million rand, the other guy, 2.7 million rand.
Oh, wow.
And in the UAE, you can still be jailed for debt. So they got jailed for 2 years. In the process, all their documents get taken in and held. So they're released from jail, and then they get told, you can't leave the country and get your documents back until you pay these debts. But now their documents are being held, so it's impossible for them to get a work permit. There's no way for them to work. So they're stuck, so they sort of flee to the embassy, and they need to stay on embassy soil so that they don't get rearrested.
Jeez.
So they've literally camped on the veranda of our embassy. Now, again, we just seem to be failing to interact with the UAE properly and rescue these guys.
Yeah.
In fact, we've now turned to the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, that sort of falls more in human trafficking and slavery. That's what they usually deal with. And now we've got these guys trying to work with us. So it's a very strange story. And I think the bottom line here is that it just speaks to our problematic relationship with the UAE, and that we need to sort this out. This country and us seem to keep butting heads, and we need to solve the problem somehow. We're not doing well.
Definitely seems like a dialogue that needs to be sorted out. Definitely some questions that I'm hoping to hear some more answers from in the future. Maybe they'll unveil themselves. But of course, this conversation continues, and we definitely want to hear from you, Mzansi. So come through on the WhatsApp line. It's 063-408-8863 as we continue to unpack some of the major headlines happening this week.
Well, we are back with our look at those major news stories of the week. We've looked at your local stories here in Mzansi, but now we're moving over to the big developing stories elsewhere in the world. So let's stick with some international news. Now, Roi Simpson, he is here, and we are talking about Turkey, who went into the polls yesterday, and it hasn't had a change in leadership for over 20 years. Power has been concentrated in the president, and the judiciary has been weakened. Is this the time for change? Might we see a new leader in power?
It's kind of both of those things. It's definitely the time for change. Look, the incumbent, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has done a really good job of putting Turkey at the center of world affairs. He's held off on approving NATO memberships. He's done all of these things that have really raised the status of Turkey. But it remains problematic to live there. You've got these economic problems. There is the issue of the violence that's happening on the borders. So really, the people of Turkey want change. And this election is basically a two-horse race between two people saying they can bring that change. The one is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's saying, look, this presidential model that I've created here, this new constitution, that is the way forward. Trust me to take you through to a new future.
As I have been for so many years before.
Absolutely, although these changes to the constitution are fresh, and this disempowerment of the judiciary, that's only about, say, 3 or 4 years old. But then you've got a contender for him as well, and in the form of, I just need to double check his name, because he's still fairly
Mr. Kemal.
That's Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu.
Kılıçdaroğlu, okay.
It's not a familiar name to us, but it really has had resonance in Turkey itself. So about 98-something% of the ballots have been counted, and Erdogan has fallen below 50%. He's at 49.3%.
Sure.
And it's one of those things where you need to get over 50%, otherwise you go to a runoff. So it's looking like we're headed to a runoff between these two, and it's going to be these competing visions. And I think the implications globally of who's going to win are going to be quite massive, because if Erdogan stays in power, it's more of the same, and we're not quite sure what Kılıçdaroğlu will bring in terms of changed relationships internationally.
So theoretically, either option here, you can't really anticipate what would happen. I mean, there's the hope that the current president might implement this change if he was to stay in that position. But then there's also this hope of someone new, someone fresh that doesn't necessarily have a track record, and we're just praying that they implement what they are coming to do, right?
Absolutely. I would say if Erdogan stays in power, it's going to drift more and more into the dictatorship. And all the attendant things, you're going to start seeing really problematic behaviors like imprisonments of people and things like that. That would be my guess.
Hey, all right. Well, it's an interesting conversation nonetheless, but
Heavy,
I
sorry.
can't thank you enough, Roy, for coming through this morning. Thank you for feeding us and enlightening us when it comes to these opinions, and I hope you have a fantastic week ahead.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, Mzansi, always finding out and wondering from you what you thought of these headlines this morning. If you have any opinions, share it with us on 063 408 8863. But for Zoe and I diving into the headlines, our work here is done, and we'll carry on with the rest of the show.